I want to express appreciation for working through that issue with us and setting the table for, I think, taking one more step towards bringing some sales tax generating opportunities for the city to this location. Moving towards why I'm here, and maybe back to some might call it the whining part of John Peterson, and I'm really not trying to put it in that context, but I remember at the Planning Commission when we first started talking about this, and I can't unfortunately remember the commissioner's name, but he said at 2 o'clock, Councilman, right where you said, and we're talking about this, and they seemed to, this land use made sense, and I remember him looking at staff and saying, what are we going to do with the public street that goes through this site? And for those of you that have been to a podium and you're having a privilege of talking to a governing body and somebody says something and your face has a kind of a crooked smile on it, and in your head you're thinking, what public street? Because that had never been envisioned in any plats, anything in any regard that there would be a public street bisecting this site. In fact, here comes the whining, this ownership group had dedicated a considerable amount of right-of-way for free, had committed, I want to make a correction, had committed because I heard about the previous matter with assessments and who hasn't paid, assessments about $1 million against this property to build 188th Street, and it is a very prominent street. Why we built that baby wide with the idea that it would really circle back behind our property to connect to 191st, and that was the agreed upon street configuration upon which we didn't resist the assessments. Now, I will tell you, this ownership group went through some dark times too, and it is a different configuration of ownership group, but I'll tell you what this ownership group did. We got those assessments paid, $900,000 worth through the years, up to, we got $100,000 left that will be paid here in very short order this year. So we are proud investors into the public street system of Gardner. So after we left here and the land use thing was working up, and I think I reported this to the governing body when I was here, and say, we're going to try to sit down with staff and we're going to try to figure out what's a fair way to approach this. We can probably live with another public street, and that's not all good in a lot of times, but we can probably live with being blessed with another opportunity to contribute to the city, because this wouldn't be just for our traffic. We could do that with private drives back out to the public street. But we would like to sit down and talk about some options where there's kind of a fairness approach to all this. And I will say that we started from this premise, and if you want to cut to the bottom line, the premise was, okay, we'll give free right-of-way, okay, again, and we will then develop our site around a public street. But we don't want to have to pay for another street. We paid for, we've given, you know, at the office, we've already done that, and if the city has in fact really truly changed its mind that this is now going to be how we're going to connect up 191st to Gardner Road, then, but we just don't think it's fair that, because what happens when you get a public street like this, the first pad that comes in, you get to pay the full public street. You guys know how it goes. So we started some discussions, and this is not meant as a personal criticism or criticism of staff, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I'm a little frustrated as the conversations have ensued. I think everybody's trying to do the best they can under the circumstances, but again, I think maybe it rises to the level of some input from the governing body. We even backtracked a bit and threw some options on the table to the city attorney and Mike that said, maybe we will agree to pay for part of it. Why don't we consider a benefit district that would pick up not only our property, but maybe some of the other pieces adjacent to ours that would take advantage of this new public street system. After a bit of discussion, that answer was no, we were not interested in pursuing that. We talked about a CID that could be put on place that would be a funding mechanism that we could use for public street. We were told premature, not interested. And so then we came back and said, okay, being that really, you know, we're great guys, that's why we continue to talk about it, but we came back and said, okay, we'll still start with the premise of giving you the right-of-way, which is how it worked up to the stipulation, but at least let's come to an agreement, a development agreement, an understanding with some specificity that we don't have to turn around and pay for this public street when it's decided it's needed for the overall street network. Now, Part of that would be, for instance, if we started development and people had to get in there, we threw out some options. 60-foot of right-of-way is what we're getting. I think, staff can confirm, the vision is a 3-lane road, north-south with a turn lane, chicken lane, whatever, suicide lane, whatever we call it. If we're going to build in just to serve ours, because the city's not ready to build the entire street system, we suggested 28 feet, curb on one side, just go to the pad that needs to be served. We'd have to do a traffic study to make sure it moves it out right, but not that we'd have to build the whole street in, then the whole street in, death by 1,000 cuts, and we're right back into, based on some engineering estimates, we got another $1 million contribution to a road that I think everybody, because I know there's neighbors to the south that are concerned about how their traffic's going to go. This is a street that really is serving the overall street network. So that's a bit where we are. And then, quite honestly, and I don't really know, and I really don't know, I'm not being cynical here or snide or anything like that. I keep getting a sense the city hasn't made a decision. This is really where the road needs to go. Because I hear at the Planning Commission, I wasn't here, that there were some concerns about what's going to happen from the south. And then, quite honestly, I read the staff report tonight, and we've changed the name of the road. If I'm going to have a public street go through my road, and I hope to bring you a couple 100,000 square feet of retail, really tough to tell a good, solid national retailer, hey, your address is going to be something, 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 and with all due respect, I can't remember what we changed it to. Cypress Road? Or, Locust. That is not a good thing. That is not a good, 191st Street, right, that's, I mean, just little things like that. I mean, a little decision made, we'll take care of this guy, we'll call it, that's a big deal to the future development and viability. I don't want to drive that point too hard, but it's, I think, reflective of the fact, do we really know what we're doing here? Because we're kind of on the precipice here of dedicating right-of-way, and the die gets cast. And then the last point, which I hope is, again, I'm standing here wanting to work with the city, but the last thing is, we start reading the staff report, and it's, by this plat, and by dedicating the right-of-way, we don't know if we're ever going to build it, but we're telling you now, your pad site's off that road, you can't get into the one for 500 feet. The way I read the staff report, if I take the pad, I don't want to get into the weeds, but there's one pad there that logically could develop as a 2-acre pad, I would have no access. So, one of two approaches, really, and I think they both take the same maneuver, which is to continue this for 30 days, and we've talked to the buyer, and they're okay with that, because they know this has to be worked out, because the idea that we will pay another $1 million for this road, if that is in the offing, it just, the economics just don't work. And that's not a threat, it's just the way you look at it when you're trying to, I've made bad investments too, Mayor, and I'm trying to avoid making another one. But I think a continuance would give us an option to do one of two things, and maybe with a bit of direction, encouragement from the governing body. Sit down with the staff and come up with some specificity so we know, if we need to get there before you build the road, we know exactly what we're going to have to build. That, we'll call it a half a road or 40% of the road will be built to city standards, we understand that, but why put a road in with 2 curbs when one of the curbs is going to come out when you guys build your road? You know, it's just a lot of kind of common sense, logical, typical sequential development issues like that. Either we get to that agreement, bring it back, we'll dedicate to you now, or we'll go the other route, which is allowed pursuant to the stipulation of the zoning, which is we just back up, we don't plat the ground, we get them planted, and we just wait 2 years. We'll put an agreement in, we'll dedicate it in 2 years, and we'll kind of see where the chips fall. I would think the city might want a little more specificity and know that they have this option in place and hand, and just a little bit of dialogue, but we just could not get, and again, with the utmost respect to Mike and to the city attorney and everybody else, could not get a dialogue with specificity that would at least be an agreement we could bring back to the governing body. So I'd like another chance to do it. It's going to take, 30 days or we'll go the other route, and that's it. I can't even a lawyer can't even think of anything more to say right now. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So you're basically asking for a 30-day continuum on this item?
I am, Councilwoman, but also I guess, some feedback that bringing a development agreement back as